Welcome, everybody, to the TFR Tech Talk podcast. We are here with Frank Mendoza. He's a highly respected and award-winning analytics leader with over 20 years of experience in strategy, customer experience, and data science. He's the founder of Catalytics, a service company that helps Fortune 500 companies like Nike, Kellogg, Keurig, Dr. Pepper, and Jim Beam to execute actionable data, AI, and data analytics strategies to solve their toughest business challenges. Frank holds a BS in mechanical engineering and an executive MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. And we are happy to have him here talk things AI with us. Hey, Frank, how's it going?
Good, Teddy. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here today.
Man, happy to have you. So let's get right into it. So we're here today to talk about AI. So let's talk about the differences between what we're defining as narrow and generative AI.
Yeah, so I think, Teddy, whenever people are conversing about AI, they've tended to group this thing as this large, nebulous term, just AI. And what we're really finding is it's important for people to recognize that there are two types of AI that we're really talking about. One is the one that really gained a lot of hype as of November of last year. This is what ChatGPT, when it got introduced, the ability to do things that other people just didn't recognize AI could do yet, which is create text. And then there's the introduction of things like Midjourney and DALL-E and creating images and eventually music. We're gonna get into videos eventually. All these things are very exciting, but that is what's referenced as generative AI or Gen AI is short. That has brought a lot of hype into the space, has brought a lot of interest in terms of what people want to go do. But there was a hype cycle associated with AI prior to that. And that typically focused on what is referenced as traditional AI or traditional machine learning or even narrow AI. And what we mean by that is narrow AI is it's really task specific. It tends to be a limited scope, kind of a fixed functionality. So it really boils down to identifying something that you would like to know more about and maybe predict around, and then really collecting, prepping, and analyzing data to kind of help you with that prediction. So examples of that would include things like when a customer or organization wants to know more about churn. So they have customers who are leaving in droves, and they want to understand or maybe get to a point where they can predict who's likely to leave. Some other examples might be an organization that's looking at forecasting inventory. Again, very narrow scope, not something like ChatGPT where it's going to be opened up and provide any kind of information you need, but really a prediction around a specific task that a company finds valuable and that they are experiencing challenges with at the time. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps a lot. That's some interesting stuff. Actually, what I want to do is I want to go a bit deeper. Let's save generative AI for a topic for another day. I want to get more into narrow AI, and let's talk about. You gave us a couple of the potential use cases or examples of those use cases. Now
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about how does that couch within the larger frame of data analytics? Because from our previous
Yeah.
discussions that we've had, you've kind of schooled me on these type of things, and I want to have our audience follow along with understanding what are the different stages of data analytics, and even what what are the things within them that you want to consider.
Yeah. So organizations, when you're looking at analytics, you really need to understand the maturity of where you are as an organization. So there is a concept called the evolution of analytics, and that really has four stages associated with it. Um, the first stage is described as descriptive. So you're really typically asking about what happened. So things are going on in your business, there are transactions happening, there are sales being made, logistics being done. And you really are asking questions like, what's happening in my organization today? Collecting information, developing reports, just to really understand what's going on in your business today. That's the first stage. The second stage is known as diagnostic. This typically happens when an anomaly has occurred in your organization, something that you didn't want to happen happened, and you're now asking, why did this happen? This tends to be historical and views in the rears. And so you're thinking about what are the symptoms or what are the actions that happened previously that led us to this. So you're looking at diagnostics, you're evaluating historical information to just answer the question of why did I miss my sales target, for example, or why did we lose that client. That's the second stage, diagnostic. The third moves us into predictive. This is where you're matured and you're collecting information, you're collecting data, and you're really starting to ask, I want to understand what will happen next. So you're trying to make a prediction, like we talked about before in the examples. You're looking at predicting customer churn, you're looking at forecasting inventory. You want to predict what's going to happen in the future so that you can make better decisions. The fourth stage of the analytics of the evolution of analytics really focuses on prescriptive. This is trying to give you the best about how best to make something happen or how best to take an action. And this is where you've leveraging advanced analytics, you're leveraging AI, in some cases even deep learning, to really move you to giving you a next best action to take. So this is where these solutions are giving you not just a prediction, but also giving you scenario planning, what if scenarios, that type of stuff to help you move your organization forward. So when you look at those kind of four stages, you can kind of self-select yourself as an organization, identify kind of where you sit in that evolution. The first two are all around insights. The third is all around prediction. And the fourth is all around helping me take action against those predictions. So that's kind of where we are when we look at evolution of analytics. And what I'm finding is a lot of organizations, when you're not talking about the digital, the digital people who have always been, the Googles of the world, the Apples of the world, who are migrated, Amazons of the world, to using and leveraging these technologies on a daily basis. What I'm finding is most organizations fall themselves in the descriptive or diagnostic, which means that there is a barrier to entry to get into some of these advanced analytics concepts. And that's going to require them to understand data, the categories of data, but also understand how do I prepare myself and lay the foundation necessary, Teddy, to really move up that evolution.
Okay, that's interesting, Frank. I actually want you to go deeper into that because you mentioned the categories of data, the types of data that we're going to be dealing with. Can you give me a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, so there's, most organizations don't have one source of data, right? There are CRMs, there are ERPs, there are vast amounts of data available. But when you really are looking at data, you really want to categorize the data that you have available. Now, I've identified 6 different categories of data. One in particular is reporting. This is the type of data that's typically consumed by the business user. So you take data to create reports to actually provide some of the descriptive and diagnostic analytics that we talked about earlier. There's also transactional data. This is probably the largest amount of data that most organizations have. These are various transactions from consumers, from partners and vendors, even internal transactions. Then there's master data. Master data is pivotal to making sure that there's consistency across the organization. Master data tends to be locations, products, customers, really solid kind of, as the name suggests, this is pivotal because transactional data uses master data, reporting data uses master data, all these pieces use master data. So it really is necessary for you to have a real good firm grasp of master data. The other pieces of data are reference data. This is, data that provide you some way of categorizing even the data. So think of it as an example with that would be looking at HR data. So if you have a VP, a senior director, a director, a individual contributor, all those are different categories, but they're referenceable data. They reference some other aspect that allows you to then potentially segment that data. Then there's metadata. This is just data about data, right? So things like file type, file size, things that describe the data that allow you to then do things with it. The last is what's referred to as golden data. Golden data is kind of the aspiration of where organizations want to go to. This refers to a single source of truth. This is data that's been deduped, it's been cleansed, it's been consolidated, it's been validated. People know if they're using golden data, they can actually trust it and recognize that other parts of the organization are also using that golden data to make the same kind of inferences and decisions. Does that
That's
help?
interesting, Frank. Yeah, that helps because one of the things I'm looking to tie this to is for our audience, we have a very high interest in ERP and how that relates
Mm-hmm.
to the things we're talking about. And when you're going through these, first the stages of data analytics and also the categories of data, what ties this to me is looking at first, a company that is using their ERP, understanding where they are
Mm-hmm.
at in the stage of data analytics. And for most companies that are not your Google Amazons of the world, they're somewhere in the first two, maybe the third if they're very well prepared. And if they're in one of those first two stages, we looking at those us looking at those categories of data. I have some questions to you around master data versus or like its relationship with the transactional and the reporting
Mm-hmm.
data. Does master data sit as kind of the kind of the framework that the rest of them reference to, and that's where it's maintained? Or how would you define master data versus like the reporting or transactional data?
Yeah, so typically, let's take transactional data, right? Transaction will have, let's just take a customer transaction. It typically has a customer name associated with it, maybe a customer location. It has a product that you sold to that customer. So think of each of those elements as a part of master data. So the name of the customer, you want to make sure that you have one name for that customer, right? It's not like incorporated for one, Inc. for another,
Mhm.
missing the INC period. Each one of those could potentially create another opportunity for you to clean up data because you didn't have a good master data that designated that customer. Similarly, around products, if you have multiple names of products or different SKUs or things like that, that could cause more disruption in your collection of data and analysis of data because you didn't have a good product master data that people could leverage. So, if you look at transactional data, transactional is sometimes made up of a lot of pieces of master data. So you can see why master data, maintaining it, cleaning it, and having governance around it is so pivotal because transactional data, reporting data, all feed using that master data, and so it's important to make sure that um, as an organization you have one source and you're trying to get that master data to golden data as quickly as possible without much rework.
I hear you. Actually, let me anchor this because if we'll
Mm-hmm.
use NetSuite as our example,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about these different data points, if let's say we're taking a typical sales transaction, it's housed within multiple tables
Yeah.
where you have the customer table where you're talking about the customer having that connected to the transaction and having that customer data be something that's been deduped, that's been defined properly with good data points. And then we're talking about the transaction, making sure the transactional data points are there for the type of thing that it's being bought and the financial aspects of it. And then if we're talking about the items, making sure, like you were saying, the item is deduped and the item is something that is got good data points around it, and then having these things work in conjunction with each other is something that's referenceable for the reporting. And then looking at those things from the lens of master data is what I think will make sense to go in next to, because the natural next question with these kind of things is, well, if I am a customer looking at, well, I've been able to self-select into what stage of data analytics I'm in. I know what kind of categories of data I need to be considering. So what now? Like, how do I go forward in the path of trying to find a way to get to a point of being able to use these insights to help me make better business decisions?
Yeah, I think Teddy, the important thing is to understand kind of where you're trying to go. right? So, for lack of a path, any road will get you there, right? But you have to first figure out where we're trying to get to. And what I would suggest is what identifying a problem that the organization can get behind. So it typically is tops down in that regard, because you need to demonstrate that there is objectives and goals that the business is going after that your analytics team or solution can help solve, right? So the first piece is going to be all around identifying the problem. The second is defining a hypothesis around that problem, right? So we think customers are churning because of X, Y, and Z, right? Or we think forecast models are affected by X, Y, and Z. So developing a hypothesis is going to be imperative, because the next step is around data collection concerning that hypothesis, right? So do I have the information and data I need to test that hypothesis? So do I have the features and data and attributes around customers, around products, around whatever, that is going to allow me to build a narrow machine learning model or narrow AI that's going to allow me to then make a prediction around that specific task. So that's kind of, again, very high level approach, right? Identifying the problem, identifying a hypothesis, and then starting to collect the data. The hard part, Teddy, is there's a heavy barrier of entry at times for organizations, because they haven't always done the things necessary to ensure that they have master data in place, that there aren't duplicates, right? That the sales organization doesn't have a list of customers and the marketing organization has a different list of customers, and they don't coincide, right? Putting that effort, putting um, that action into place to ensure that you're prepared to actually start the collection, the prep, the cleansing, all those things that are necessary. And I got to imagine, in your experience with NetSuite, that you've probably seen this multiple times in your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned something before that I want to touch back on, which is having the golden data, the singular source of truth. And when you have an ERP as the backbone of your company's information and transactional data, it is imperative that you get to a place where you feel confident with that data and that information. So to the point you made about, well, you want to make sure that your sales organization has the same list of customers and as the marketing organization, and or even support or operations, they're all dealing with the same data. You can do this with NetSuite, because NetSuite has a full breadth of functions within it as a single ERP, CRM, fulfillment, and all of these kind of things. Or you can make sure that you tie in other platforms that you're
Mm-hmm.
using so that you have a consolidated, cleansed version of data coming through your systems. So, for instance, there are many companies that have Shopify as their e-commerce solution that integrates into NetSuite with platforms such as Lego. And what you want to make sure is that you have things tying one to one. You don't have duplicate customers. You want to make sure that these transactional flows happen in a way that reflects what the reality is, so that when you're looking at the data as it flows downstream, you can feel comfortable that you have what is really happening in your company. You have a usable set of data that you can then use for the type of insights that we're talking about. So I look at what we do here at TFR Solutions is a lot of data enablement, because
Mm-hmm.
we help understand what are you trying to track, and we put your system in a place where you're able to get your insights out of it and have your inputs be reduced as much as possible with automation and understanding what kind of things need to be pulled through from one section to another or one system to another. And one of the other aspects that I wanted to touch on too is when we talked about the data integration part of looking at your information from one set of systems to another, that it's critical that you have somebody looking at not just the individual systems and optimization in those lens from that lens, but also looking at it from a macro data perspective, which is why I
Yeah.
think it ties into the goal of the golden data. So uh,
No,
that's
definitely, Teddy.
yeah,
I
great.
think what you're hitting on is um, the right approach to tackle this, because I think for a lot of organizations this becomes very overwhelming, right? That, oh man, I got to go get all my data clean. I got to go get all my, clean and make sure everything is pristine before I can jump into this. But the reality is there are tools, there are solutions, but the important thing is to stay focused, right? Collect the information that is necessary to test that hypothesis we talked about earlier, but really to get to a point where you can start to make predictions, and then over time introduce new features, introduce new attributes, introduce new data, even external data, from the internal data that you have available. Those are all things that you can start to contribute and introduce, to give more accuracy to predictions and ensure that your predictions don't begin to drift over time, that they're always evaluated and reinforced.
All right, that's great. Look, Frank, I really appreciate all of the insights. It's something that I think we'll have many ongoing conversations about, because the need for data and the need for being able to make good business decisions is not going away. In fact, the need is increasing over time. And with all of these, AI tools and type of things that we hear chatter about, I appreciate having somebody that we can talk to help us make sense of all the things that we're hearing so much about. So,
Yeah, there's certainly, Teddy, there's certainly a lot of hype right now around AI, right? And knowing the differences between Gen AI and what's considered narrow or traditional AI is imperative, because organizations need to be equipped to understand what that barrier to entry is to get into these, and have people like yourself and others who can help them along the way.
great. Well, Frank, thanks so much for spending your time with us today. Go ahead and let the people know where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Teddy. LinkedIn is the best approach, right? Frank Mendoza on LinkedIn. Company's name Catalytics, and if I can be of any assistance to anyone in your audience, I'd be more than happy to help.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in with us. Y'all have a good one. Appreciate it. We can stop the recording there.